To acquire a basic knowledge of how chord progressions are structured, you must first have a basic working knowledge of the major scale, the minor scale, and how chords themselves are formed. In this session, we'll discuss how to take the knowledge that we have about scales and chord structure and start constructing basic chord progressions. It's super important to remember that, like any art form, the rules of music are made to be broken. Some of the most genius musical compositions were constructed by destroying the rules and letting the heart speak. However, basic rules are always a great place to begin. So let's now take the key of C major and remember that the same rules apply to any major key. As we discussed in this session on the major scale, there are 8 notes in the key of C major, and here they are again. We will now look at the chords formed from the notes of the C major scale, one note at a time. So the 1 chord, or C, it forms the chord C major. C is the first note in the C major scale. This note indicates what key we are currently working in, but it also is called the root or the tonic. And this chord, when working in major keys, will always be a major chord. This chord is constructed from the 1st, 3rd, and 5th notes of the C major scale. Check out the session on basic chord structure if you need a refresher on that. For the 2, it's a D. It forms the chord D minor 7. A D is the second note in the C major scale. The second note in any major scale usually forms a minor chord that is often played as a minor 7th chord. And this chord is formed from the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th notes of the D minor scale. The 3, or the E, forms the chord E minor. The 3rd note in the C major scale is E, and the 3rd note in the major scale is often played as a natural minor chord. So the chord played here would be a pure E minor chord, and the E minor chord is constructed from the 1st, 3rd, and 5th notes of the E minor scale. However, in most modern Western music, and for our purposes, this note is used as a bass note and played over the 1st chord of the key that we are playing in. So in the key of C major, the chord we would typically play in this position would be called C over E. And this is simply a C major chord with an E as the bass, or the lowest note in the chord. And in terms of the number system, we would call it a 1 over 3. The 4, or the F, forms the chord F major. The 4th chord in the scale of C major is F, and the 4th chord in any major key is typically formed of a major chord. So in the key of C major, we get an F major chord. This chord is formed from the 1st, 3rd, and 5th notes of the major scale. The 5, or the G, forms the chord G major. G is the 5th note in the scale of C. This note, the 5th note, is played as a major chord in the key of C. That chord is G major. The G major chord is formed of the 1st, 3rd, and 5th notes of the G major scale. The 6, or the A, forms the chord A minor. The 6th note of the scale of C major is A, and this note is almost always played as a minor chord and is sometimes referred to as the minor 6. In the key of C major, we get the A minor chord, which is constructed of the 1st, 3rd, and 5th notes of the A minor scale. But here's a little extra info. This note is also called the relative minor. This note relates the C major scale to the A minor scale. And if you look at these scales side by side, you'll find that the scales contain the exact same notes. The 7, or the B, traditionally forms the B diminished chord. Now don't get scared, I can see the look on your face from here. No, you did not miss anything. We did not discuss diminished chords. The 7th note in the C major scale is B, and when the chord of the 7th note of a scale stands alone, it is traditionally played as a diminished 5th chord. This chord is made up from the 1st, 3rd, and diminished 5th note of the B minor scale. However, in most modern Western music, and for our purposes, this note is used as a bass note played over the 5th chord of the key that we are playing in. So in the key of C major, the chord we would typically play in this position would be called the G over B. This is simply a G major chord with a B as the bass, or the lowest note in the chord. And in terms of the number system, we would call it a 5 over 7. For the 8, or the C, it forms the C major chord again. The 8th note of the scale of C major is the octave of the 1st note, which is the note C. The C major chord is also played in this position just as it was in the 1st note. Now let's make up and play some progressions. Alright, so make sure you have a chord diagram and a notation chart for your instrument handy in case you need it. You will find that some of the chord combinations we play sound better than others. So play through the following 3 progressions and feel how the chords go together. After you become comfortable playing the individual chords, put some rhythm to the progression and play them through a few times. So the first progression is C, F, A minor, F. And the second progression is C, G, F, G. And the third progression is C, G over B, A minor, and F. Now let's look at the same progressions in just number forms. The first progression is 1, 4, 6 minor, 4. The second is 1, 5, 4, 5. And the third progression is 1, 5 over 7, 6 minor, 4. And if you were to put some rhythm to this, we'll play through all three progressions in a row. It might sound something like this. 1, 4, 6, 4. The second is 1 to the 5 to the 4 back to the 5. And the third progression is 1, walk it down to the 5 over 7, to the 6 minor, to the 4. Let's finish on the 1. So notice how the numbers correspond to each of the chords. And if you need some clarification of where we got the numbers, look back at the beginning of this session and you will see that each note from which we formed a chord was also assigned a number in the scale. This number system is referred to as the Nashville number system, and it's used widely throughout the music world. Take the information that we gathered about the G major scale in the session on the major scale and in the session on basic chord structure and apply the chord progression knowledge that you have just learned. Write out the numbers 1 through 8 and assign the appropriate notes, and then the appropriate chords to each note in the scale. The explanation for each chord that is formed in the key of C major applies for any key. Start with the key of G major and move on and work with the other keys to grow in your understanding of how chords and chord progressions are structured. And you will notice in using the major and minor scales that some chords just sound better together than others. But don't limit yourself. This is only a basic knowledge of how chord progressions are structured. Remember, rules were made to be broken. So hopefully this basic knowledge of how chord progressions are structured will help you to write some of your own progressions and put those progressions together to write your own songs. You may even have to watch this session a couple of times if these concepts are new for you, but don't get frustrated. Keep practicing until you understand how all of these equations work together. And I hope that this helps you take your skills to the next level.